What if there was a wave survival game where you could build structures and defenses, but you were forced to always be on the move by dangerous environmental hazards? This is where Silent Eclipse comes in, a game set in a post-apocalyptic world that has been taken over by robots. In Silent Eclipse, the players experience the game through the eyes of one of the last surviving people on Earth in a first-person perspective. Within this first-person view, the player will be able to see their health, stamina, ammo, and the objects that they have built. Players will be able to attack enemies in two different ways, with a medium-ranged rifle that spends ammo to deal larger amounts of damage, or a short-range melee attack that will cost stamina. Players will be able to build using items that have a chance of being dropped by enemies. Each different enemy will drop a unique part used for building. Players will only be able to have 10 objects constructed at any time, and the 3 different objects that players can build are a turret, an explosive trap, and a barrier. The goal of the game is to survive against the robots for as many waves as possible, while also getting the highest score possible. Score is acquired through killing enemies and staying in environmental hazards for extended periods of time. There will also be special locations that are called out to the player where they receive more score for each kill and each second spent in a hazard for a limited period of time. The main anti-force of the game is going to be the enemies that the player will encounter. The Grunt is the base unit of the robots with average stats similar to the player, and on death they have a chance of dropping a sword that will increase the player's range for a limited time. The Blitzer is a much faster enemy who also has much lower health. However, if the Blitzer reaches the player or a structure they have constructed, it will blow up and destroy any player-made construct. On death, the Blitzer drops the materials to create an explosive trap. The Gunner is a ranged unit that has average health but is slower and attacks from further away. When the Gunner is killed, they have a chance of dropping a power core that the player can use to create turrets. The last enemy the player faces is the Vanguard. A much larger unit than the others, this unit is very slow and has tons of health. It will deal a lot of damage to players or structures if they get too close. Another anti-force that the player will be fighting against constantly is the environmental hazards. These include Death Fog, which damages the player but does not harm the robots, giving the enemies an advantage against the player to push them out of a defensive situation. Lightning Storms, which have a chance to strike and deal damage to both players and enemies, and Meteor Strikes, which deal damage to both sides, and wherever a meteor lands, it will destroy any player-made structure. The largest risk that Silent Eclipse faces is the scope of the game. There are 4 different enemies and 3 different environmental hazards. It could be possible that a team of students might not be able to complete the full game in only a few months. One way to mitigate these risks is to follow the development cycle of the game for 1 month, and if at the end of the month the team is unable to have at least the player controls, grunt enemy, and placing structures down, then the scope of the game needs to be reduced. To do this, 2 of the enemy types will be removed along with 1 of the environmental hazards. One game Silent Eclipse could be compared to is Killing Floor. Killing Floor is a first-person wave survival game just like Silent Eclipse. However, Silent Eclipse uses environmental hazards to force players out of situations where they feel comfortable and make them roam around the map. Here's what a section of gameplay would look like in Silent Eclipse. The player has some defenses built and they are being attacked by grunts. They decide to stay and defend what they have. Then, a ranged gunner starts attacking them and the player has to go out, for they have no ammo left. Then, a bonus score zone appears above the player's defenses, right before a hazard also spawns. The player has no ammo and little defenses, but they decide to risk staying in the storm for additional points. Then, a blitzer spawns and finally takes down the player's defenses, and they are overwhelmed by units, forcing them to run away. My name is Zachary Stancliffe, and thank you for watching the second pitch for Silent Eclipse.